camera on the farmhouse security system caught it all the flare of an open flame snapping to the edge of the wheat field just after dusk. The golden stalks, rippling in the evening breeze moments before, hissed and curled as smoke rose in tight columns. The air smelled sharp, acrid, a stark contrast to the warm earth beneath. Standing there, lighter in hand, was the HOA president. Polished and poised, her clipped suit and confident stance made her look every bit the polished authority figure she was. Locals called her Karen, for the brusque way she dismissed anyone who questioned her. She justified her act coldly citing a fabricated landscaping violation that supposedly threatened neighborhood standards. But the wheat was planted within all legal boundaries, documented and nurtured for years. The next day, the community meeting was thick with murmurs. Calm and collected, the property owner stepped forward, confronting her with facts, quiet determination, and a refusal to escalate. But Karen, unshaken, offered only dismissive smirks and clipped denials, confident in her unchecked control. The line between ownership and authority had just been drawn, and the slow burn had begun. Karen's every move was choreographed spotless navy suit, clipboard bristling with violation notices, voice clipped and unwavering. She wielded the HOA's power like a weapon, enforcing rules without question or nuance. To her, the wheat field was an eyesore, a blemish on her carefully curated neighborhood image. But the homeowner was something else entirely: decades of hands-on experience managing fertile farmland, legal documents preserved like heirlooms, and a quiet expertise that ran deeper than paper fines or meeting room edicts. He knew every inch of the land, every covenant tied to its title, from county agricultural exemptions to recorded protections that placed his wheat beyond HOA reach. Sustainable practices kept the soil rich, the crop healthy and ecosystem, not just a plot. He wasn't here to rebel with noise or anger. His was a steady, lawful stewardship. The stark contrast was clear. Karen's bureaucratic bluster against a calm, competent owner anchored in law and legacy. On one side, imposed authority bent on control. On the other, rightful ownership standing firm with quiet certainty. This wasn't just a field to him, it was family history, written in soil and seed. The wheat field had been in his family for 4 generations, each planting season layered with stories of hard work and quiet pride. His grandfather had stood here after purchasing the original parcel in the 1940s, clearing scrubland and investing in soil quality. His father expanded the acreage, meticulously maintaining the land's health, with cover crops and irrigation systems installed decades before most neighbors had even considered lawn care. He carried with him faded black and white photographs of harvest days, yellowed land surveys signed by county officials, and deed records outlining precise boundaries and use restrictions. The county itself recognized the field as agricultural land, protected under exemptions from typical residential landscaping rules. These weren't just keepsakes, they were ironclad proof of his rights and responsibilities as the landowner. That legacy formed the backbone of his argument, grounding his calm resolve. This wheat field wasn't a convenience or a statement, it was a living, breathing extension of decades of investment, documented and lawful. When Karen's stance disregarded this history, it wasn't just arrogance, it was a dismissal of ownership itself. And he was ready to prove why that mattered. The day after the fire, an official letter landed on his doorstep. The HOA demanded the wheat field's removal, couching it in phrases like neighborhood aesthetics and community standards. They threatened fines thousands of dollars, escalating daily until compliance. The message was clear: submit or pay. But instead of panic or rash reaction, he leaned into the paperwork, pulling out association bylaws, county codes, and state statutes protecting agricultural land. There it was, every relevant exemption, every procedural requirement the HOA had ignored. He identified a growing pattern: arbitrary enforcement aimed at personal power rather than public interest. Quietly, he documented the HOA's inconsistencies, saved official communications, and compiled correspondence showing selective rule application. While Karen's letters dripped with dismissiveness and thinly veiled threats, he responded with calm, measured notices citing legal backing and requesting formal hearings as mandated. As letters crossed back and forth, neighbors began to take sides. Some whispered doubts about HOA governance. Others remained loyal to Karen's polished face. The stakes were no longer just the wheat field. They had become a referendum on control, rights, and who really owned this community. The slow burn was intensifying into a carefully calculated battle. While researching county easements and water management records, he uncovered something no one else had seemed to notice. The HOA's country club sat directly downstream from a levee system bordering his property. This levee wasn't just a berm, it was a critical flood control structure designed to channel excess water away from the residential areas and into a nearby river. His land's natural runoff flowed through this system, making the levee a linchpin in local water management. Digging deeper, he obtained an engineering report tucked away in county archives. It revealed the HOA had repeatedly failed to perform mandatory levee inspections, permit renewals, and essential repairs as required by state environmental regulations. The report outlined increased flood risk tied directly to their negligence, a ticking time bomb. He pored over blueprints and cross-referenced water flow maps, environmental codes, and correspondence between the HOA and local regulators. With quiet satisfaction, he realized this overlooked vulnerability was his key leverage. If he chose, a controlled release of water via this levee could legally redirect floodwaters, not as reckless retaliation, but as enforcement of inherent property rights entwined with environmental law. This hidden structural weakness wasn't just chance. It was a door opened by arrogance and neglect. And he was ready to step through it. With the hidden leverage in hand, he set a deliberate plan in motion, one grounded entirely in lawful action and meticulous preparation. Months prior, he had contacted environmental engineers and legal counsel, seeking guidance on how to safely and legally manage the levee's gates without incurring liability. The permits were secured quietly through county officials aware of the HOA's own neglected obligations. Every step was documented, videos recorded as he inspected the gates, logged water flow readings, and coordinated closely with environmental agencies tasked with overseeing flood control. On the chosen day, the homeowner opened the levee gates, releasing a measured volume of water toward the country club's downstream property line. The flow was controlled, well within environmental norms and his rights as a landowner managing natural runoff. This wasn't an act of aggression. It was the practical enforcement of legal rights over water management that HOA leadership had ignored. In the days that followed, he maintained an open line of communication with county water authorities, providing data and compliance reports that preemptively countered any accusations. Meanwhile, the HOA president and board were caught off guard. This was no emotional retaliation born of anger, but a calculated, documented assertion of ownership and responsibility. Where she expected chaos, he offered precision. Where she wielded threats, he applied law. The power balance was shifting silently, undeniably. The next HOA meeting was packed, neighbors squeezed into folding chairs. Whispers filled the air and tension tightened like a wire. The flooding incidents had become an unavoidable topic, dominating the agenda. Slowly, the protagonist stepped forward, calm and commanding. He laid out his case with quiet authority. Documented evidence of the HOA's blatant neglect of levee maintenance, missing permits, and violations reported by county inspectors. He referenced environmental codes and presented water management data he'd meticulously gathered, illustrating how the HOA's failure created a liability for everyone. Karen, once untouchable, now fidgeted behind her polished desk. Her clipped tone faltered under the weight of facts. Attempts to dismiss or deflect only highlighted her shallow grasp of the legal and technical realities. As he spoke, murmurs grew into nods of reluctant agreement. The community's confidence in the HOA president crumbled. When the meeting concluded, the board was forced to acknowledge official investigations and immediate steps for levee repair. Local media had caught wind of the story footage and quotes circulated swiftly, exposing the HOA leadership's arrogance and mismanagement. The once dominant figure, whose power relied on unchecked authority, was publicly humiliated. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a collective reckoning. The calm competence of one homeowner had dismantled a regime built on ego and neglect. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. In the aftermath, he stood quietly by the restored wheat field, its golden waves catching the sunlight like a promise kept. At no point had he resorted to vandalism or spite, no graffiti, no sabotage, only facts, law, and deliberate measured steps. His patience and respect for legal boundaries set him apart from the impulsive hostility the HOA had wielded. Neighbors who once accepted Karen's iron grip began to question the limits of HOA power, sparking conversations about accountability and respect for individual rights. The wheat field wasn't just reclaimed, it became a symbol of what ownership really meant. Responsibility, legacy, and resilience. This was more than a single victory. It was a resetting of the neighborhood's moral compass, where calm competence outpaced arrogance and raw authority. His restraint underscored the principle that true dominance arises not from rage or chaos, but from quiet knowledge, lawful patience, and strategic persistence. In the end, he hadn't just defended his land, he had reminded everyone what ownership requires: respect, expertise, and the conviction to hold firm without compromising integrity. The slow burn had transformed into lasting restoration. The story didn't end with one levee or one wheat field. Beneath the polished facades and neat rules, the HOA's vulnerabilities hinted at deeper cracks in community power flaws, waiting to be exposed by those with the patience and knowledge to see them. For every encroachment, there was a counterweight, hidden leverage often overlooked by complacent authorities. He knew this wouldn't be the last battle. Others in the neighborhood faced similar overreach and aware their own rights could be defended with the same careful strategy and quiet competence. The slow, methodical unraveling of unchecked control was just beginning. As the HOA scrambled to recover, neighbors began to listen. Ownership wasn't passive, it was a responsibility and a weapon in itself. Those ready to study their deeds, dig into codes, and apply calm pressure would soon find their own leverage. The next story would reveal how another hidden weakness in HOA power structures triggered a new stand, one that demanded even greater resolve and precision. The lesson: quiet competence always wins, and the fight for property rights never truly ends.